Welcome back. This is video 4 of the executive branch. Today we're going to be clarifying just a few points about the cabinet. So the cabinet activity that we do in class dealing with the Padlet, where we go through and look at all the different secretaries and what they're supposed to do, is kind of the main part of the cabinet section. But this one is just going to help clarify a few things for you and give you some backstory on the cabinet and how presidents have used them. So starting off, presidential advisors and leaders of the executive departments are included in the cabinet. So we have 15 secretaries, and you guys already know that. And whenever you hear the word secretary, your brain typically goes to someone who works in an office or someone who is kind of like an assistant for a boss or something like that. But whenever we're talking about cabinet secretaries, we're talking about people who are in charge of not only advising the president, but are in charge of pretty massive departments within the federal bureaucracy. So some examples of the secretaries, and you can reference the Padlet as well. You've got your Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Homeland Security, the Attorney General. All of those people are considered part of the president's cabinet. And it's important to note that the Constitution doesn't make any requirements or doesn't say or set any qualifications for people to be in the cabinet. It basically says the president can have advisors, and that's pretty much it. So George Washington, one of the many precedents that he set, was not only to kind of collect, so to speak, advisors, but also to call them into session, to convene them, to actually have meetings with them and try to learn from them and get their advice on stuff. So that's pretty cool. The vice president is also considered part of the cabinet, part of that group of people that advise the president. And then you've also got other directors, administrators, the chief of staff, the press secretary. We hear from that person a lot. The director of the Office of Management and Budget could be considered part of the cabinet. So just basically anybody who works within the executive branch could be part of the cabinet, called whenever the president needs them to give them advice, which is pretty cool. So some historical cabinets. Of course, we're going to talk about FDR because why not? Anyway, FDR utilized what he called the brain trust. So FDR had his cabinet, and then he had a brain trust, okay? So people in his cabinet included, for example, Frances Perkins. FDR was the first president to have a female secretary, which was super cool, female member of the cabinet. She was the first female secretary, and she was the Secretary of Labor, which is super awesome. FDR also called this group of super smart people his brain trust. So you had people like doctors, lawyers, scientists, professors, okay? Anybody that he could glean any kind of information from or learn from at all, okay? And one of the reasons that he calls the brain trust into existence is, during World War II, whenever the United States is kind of figuring out what to do next. You guys remember learning about the Manhattan Project and nuclear weapons and all of those different things. And FDR realized that he was not an expert. He was not the number one head honcho on all things dealing with anything. So he recognized the fact that he needed advisors, and he needed specifically this one group of really super smart people that could help him make sound decisions, which is pretty awesome. So the kitchen cabinet was utilized by this guy named Andrew Jackson. You may have heard of him before. Andrew Jackson is really well known for being the first kind of common president. One of his goals whenever he became president was he wanted to really be a man of the people. He wanted to kind of get rid of all of the pomp and circumstance, get rid of the almost aristocratic feel that the White House had kind of gotten since the creation of our country. So whenever he calls the kitchen cabinet, or whenever he calls his cabinet into session, they're known as the kitchen cabinet. And it's because it's a group of his buddies that they supposedly meet in the White House kitchen. They come in through the kitchen door. They don't come in through the front door. It's an informal gathering, okay, that he had in addition to his regular cabinet. So one thing I want you to think about with cabinets and using your cabinet, we have had, and I mean, this is it's a fact, we've had weak presidents and we've had strong presidents. We've had presidents that are very determined to set out and accomplish an agenda, and by golly, nobody's going to mess with them and nobody's going to deter them. And then we've had presidents that kind of just sit back and kind of let everybody else take care of it. You know, I'm the president, hair flip, but I'm going to let everybody else take care of business, and I'm just going to sit back here. So what type of president do you think would use their cabinet more? Do you think a weak president or a strong president would? And then why? And just make sure you explain your response, because I'm excited to read those. Okay, the inner cabinet is used to describe what are considered like the most important or most prestigious cabinet positions. And those are the State Department, the Treasury Department, the Defense Department, and the Justice Department. Those four comprise the inner cabinet, and they are the oldest cabinet positions, okay? So also, fun fact, keep in mind that the Department of Defense prior to Harry Truman's administration was known as the Department of War. But after World War II, Harry Truman wanted to focus not on necessarily war and declaring war and all that kind of stuff. He wanted to focus on peace and defending our borders. So that's why it's known as the Department of Defense. Okay, so keep in mind also one more thing with the cabinet is that most people are going to rely more on their family and friends more than someone that they, invite into their cabinet to be approved by the Senate and confirmed and all that kind of stuff. But think about what you would do if you were president. Are you going to rely more heavily on your close friends and family, or are you going to really rely on the opinions of your advisors that have been approved by the Senate and are like super prestigious people? So with that, I will stop for this video. And if you guys have any questions, please let me know.